If people keep taking you for granted, it's not because they don't appreciate you. It's because you've been choosing peace over self-respect. And once you hear this, you won't unsee how that one habit quietly trains people how to treat you. Most people don't lose respect because they have no boundaries. They lose respect because they explain their boundaries too much. Over-explaining feels polite. It feels mature. It feels like you're being fair. But psychologically, it does something very different. The moment you start justifying a boundary, you subtly communicate uncertainty about your own right to have it. You move from a position of authority into a position of negotiation, and once a boundary becomes a negotiation, it stops being a boundary at all. When you explain yourself repeatedly, you are not clarifying, you are asking for permission. You are saying, without words, I need you to agree with this before I'm allowed to stand by it. And people pick up on that instantly. Not consciously, but emotionally. They sense that if they push a little more, you'll give a little more. If they question it, you'll soften it. If they resist, you'll rephrase it. Over time, they learn that your limits are flexible, adjustable, and dependent on their reaction. Calm enforcement feels uncomfortable at first because it removes the safety net of approval. There is no long explanation to hide behind, no emotional cushioning, just a simple decision followed by consistent action. And that simplicity can feel harsh to someone who has been conditioned to believe that boundaries must be defended with logic, stories, or emotional labor. But clarity does not require explanation. Strength does not require justification. Over-explaining often comes from a fear of being misunderstood or disliked. You want people to see that you're reasonable, that you've thought things through, that you're not being selfish. So you give context. You share your internal process. You soften your tone. You add disclaimers. You say things like, I hope you understand, or I just don't want this to come across the wrong way. What you don't realize is that the more you do this, the more you train people to believe that your comfort is secondary to their understanding. People who respect themselves don't rush to be understood. They are clear, and they allow others to react however they choose. They don't argue with pushback. They don't overcorrect when someone is disappointed. They don't keep talking to fill the silence. They say what they mean, and then they let the moment stand. That silence is not weakness. It's the space where authority lives. When someone tests a boundary and you respond with a long explanation, you reward the test. You show them that resistance earns them more access to you, more energy, more engagement. Calm enforcement does the opposite. It removes the incentive to push. A short, steady response followed by consistent behavior teaches people that there is nothing to gain by crossing the line. There is also a subtle power shift that happens when you over-explain. You position the other person as the judge. You place them in the role of deciding whether your boundary is valid. And once they are the judge, you are no longer equal. You are defending yourself in your own life. Calm enforcement removes the courtroom entirely. There is no case to argue. There is only a decision. This doesn't mean being cold or aggressive. Calm enforcement is quiet. It is emotionally regulated. It doesn't punish. It doesn't threaten. It simply doesn't bend. And because it doesn't bend, it doesn't need volume. People who are secure in their boundaries don't repeat themselves. They don't escalate. They don't chase agreement. Their actions do the speaking. Many people confuse explaining with communicating. But communication is not about saying more. It's about saying what matters and letting it land. When you say less, your words carry more weight. When you stop explaining, people start listening. Not because you're louder, but because you're clearer. Over time, the shift is noticeable. People stop pushing as much. They stop asking for exceptions. They adjust their behavior without needing long conversations. Not because you scared them, but because you taught them how to treat you. Calm enforcement creates predictability, and predictability creates respect. The hardest part is tolerating the discomfort that comes right after you stop over-explaining. The silence, the raised eyebrow, the pause where someone waits for you to add more. That moment is the test. If you fill it with more words, the old pattern continues. If you hold it calmly, something changes. You show that your boundary does not depend on reassurance, approval, or emotional labor. People who take you for granted rely on your tendency to explain. It gives them room to negotiate your limits. The moment you stop giving that room, the dynamic shifts. You are no longer trying to be understood. You are simply being clear. And clarity, enforced calmly and consistently, teaches others that access to you is not unlimited, not negotiable, and not dependent on how well you defend yourself. Consistently prioritizing harmony over self, respect feels noble on the surface. It sounds like maturity. It sounds like emotional intelligence. It sounds like being the bigger person. But underneath, it creates a pattern that quietly teaches people that your comfort is optional. When harmony becomes your highest value, self-respect slowly becomes negotiable, and people sense that long before you do. Choosing harmony over self-respect often starts with good intentions. You don't want conflict. You don't want tension. You don't want to be seen as difficult. So you smooth things over. You let small things slide. You tell yourself it's not worth addressing. You convince yourself that peace is more important than being right. And in the moment it works, the situation stays calm. No one is upset. Nothing explodes. But what you're really doing is postponing discomfort by internalizing it. Every time you silence yourself to keep the peace, you send a quiet message to others and to yourself. To others, the message is that your boundaries are flexible when things get uncomfortable. To yourself, the message is that your needs are less important than keeping everyone else comfortable. Over time, this becomes an unspoken agreement. People expect you to adapt. They expect you to accommodate. They expect you to be the one who understands. Harmony seeking teaches people that you will absorb tension so they don't have to. And once someone learns that, they stop being careful with you. They stop checking in. They stop considering how their behavior affects you because the cost of crossing your boundaries appears low. You won't push back. You won't disrupt the mood. You'll handle it quietly. What makes this mistake so dangerous is that it doesn't look like weakness. It looks like strength. You appear calm under pressure. You appear patient. You appear emotionally controlled. But inside, resentment builds. And resentment doesn't make you stronger. It makes you smaller. It drains your energy, dulls your presence, and disconnects you from your own authority. Self-respect creates a different kind of peace. Not the fragile peace that depends on silence, but the stable peace that comes from alignment. When your words match your limits and your actions support them, you don't need to manage the room. You don't need to monitor everyone's feelings. You're grounded. And that groundedness changes how people relate to you. People often fear that choosing self-respect will create conflict. But what actually creates ongoing conflict is avoiding it. When you consistently prioritize harmony, you don't eliminate tension. You store it. It leaks out through tone, withdrawal, passive behavior, or sudden emotional distance. People feel the shift, but don't understand it. They sense something is off, but they never connect it to the boundaries you didn't express. Those who command respect are not the loudest or most dominant. They are the most congruent. They don't rush to smooth things over at their own expense. They allow moments of discomfort to exist without rushing to fix them. They understand that temporary tension is healthier than long-term self-betrayal. When you prioritize self-respect, something subtle happens. You stop over-functioning emotionally. You stop being the mediator, the fixer, the one who always adjusts. You let others sit with their reactions. You let them feel disappointed, confused, or uncomfortable without rescuing them from it. This doesn't make you unkind, it makes you honest. Harmony that requires self-erasure is not harmony, it's compliance. Real harmony emerges when everyone is responsible for their own emotions, not when one person carries the emotional weight of the group. The moment you stop sacrificing yourself to keep things smooth, the dynamic recalibrates. Some people will resist it. Some will test it. That resistance is information. People who only feel comfortable when you are accommodating will struggle when you choose self-respect. Not because you've done something wrong, but because the rules have changed. You are no longer predictable in the way that benefited them. And predictability without boundaries is what allows people to take you for granted. Choosing self-respect doesn't mean creating unnecessary conflict. It means addressing things when they're small instead of letting them become heavy. It means speaking with clarity instead of swallowing words. It means trusting that relationships built on mutual respect can withstand honesty. At first, it feels unfamiliar. You may feel guilt. You may feel selfish. You may feel like you're disrupting the flow. That discomfort is not a sign that you're wrong. It's a sign that you're breaking a pattern that kept you agreeable but undervalued. Self-respect feels disruptive only when people are used to your silence. Over time, the result is unmistakable. You feel lighter, more stable, more present. You don't need constant validation because you're no longer abandoning yourself to earn it. People who respect boundaries lean in closer. People who benefited from your lack of them drift away. And in that shift, something important becomes clear.